So after I finished my service with the Canadian military, I went back to school. I spent about 3-4 years at NAIT getting a diploma. I then started with the government of Alberta. I thought, okay, I've served my time. I've done everything for this country that I felt passionate doing. I love my country. I love this province. We're now facing this vaccine passport, vaccine mandate. And as soon as my wife and I saw that this is where the direction that we're going, we immediately had a discussion. We decided we are not going to get bullied. I am not going to let them control my life after having served with honor for this country, for the freedoms, for our rights, for those of other people in other countries. And now I have my own government telling me how I am to show my papers or else. It's not an option for me. And I'm absolutely outraged and disgusted at what's happening right now.
Warning, censorship.
Today, you're going to meet our latest legal case to try to overturn the vaccine passport system. However, my story really didn't start out that way. I just went to cover the story of some Alberta government workers across several different ministries who were resistant to the vaccine passport system. The ones I was speaking to that day were from agriculture and forestry, the more useful parts of the government. And after I heard what they had to say, I was very compelled to do something to help. So when I got home, we put them together with the Democracy Fund, which is a registered Canadian charity operating a civil liberties initiative called FightVaccinePassports.com, where approximately 20 strategic legal cases are being brought in jurisdictions all across the country in an effort to overturn workplace vaccine mandates and proof of vaccination to go about your life in a free society. The hope is that the strategic lawsuits will work to set precedent to free the most amount of people from this sort of government tyranny. So first, we're going to meet David Price. He's a Canadian Forces veteran working in the Agriculture and Forestry Ministry of the Alberta government, and he is refusing to participate in any manner in the vaccine mandate overreach into our lives. Then you're going to meet Leighton Gray, the lawyer for David, but also for the rest of the group of Alberta government workers that David is involved with. Leighton's been working hard to try to stop the vaccine mandate in its tracks. Then I'm going to ask you to help, because these lawsuits are expensive and we're up against the government, which has endless resources by which to squash the free will and rights of workers and everyday citizens. So let's go out to Onaway, Alberta, to meet David first. Here.
Well, I joined the government of Alberta in 2009. I started in wildfire, actually. So I served as a crew member with the Helitack team. Up in Grand Prairie. I then progressed to become a timber production auditor, so kind of a desk jockey most of the time nowadays. But I've been with them as a timber production auditor since 2009, 2010, and I basically go around and audit most of the forestry companies around the province.
Now, before you got into ag and forestry as a forest fire fighter, you also have a long history of service to this country.
Yeah, I have 12 years service with 2 battalions in the Canadian Armed Forces. I served from 1997 up until 2003 with 3 RCR in Ontario. Then I moved to Alberta and I served with 3 PPCLI in Edmonton from 2003 until 2009.
Were you deployed?
I was deployed 3 times, yes.
So you've been deployed 3 times in service of this country, long history serving our country. You work in the government, in one of the real government ministries. No offense, government workers, I'm hard on you, but you do tangible work.
in the interest of the Alberta economy, and yet you face unemployment because of the vaccine mandate. Tell us a little bit about that.
So after I finished my service with the Canadian military, I went back to school. I spent about 3-4 years at NAIT getting a diploma. I then started with the government of Alberta. I thought, okay, I've served my time. I've done everything for this country that I felt passionate doing. I love my country. I love this province. I'm not originally from Alberta, but I'm a very proud Albertan. I've been here for well over a decade now. And now I work for the government of Alberta. And from the beginning of this pandemic, I almost saw the writing on the wall. Okay, I sort of saw where things were going, and I was very disturbed about it. I'm kind of ashamed to say that I was actually quite quiet at first about all of this. I just wanted to see how things were going to play out, so to speak. But very quickly, things started getting a little darker. The government encroachment started getting a little worse and worse as time went on. And that brings us to now, where we're now facing this vaccine passport, vaccine mandate. And as soon as my wife and I saw that this is where the direction that we're going, we immediately had a discussion. We decided we are not going to get bullied. I am not going to let them control my life after having served with honor for this country, for the freedoms, for our rights, for those of other people in other countries. And now I have my own government telling me how I am to show my papers or else. It's not an option for me. And I'm absolutely outraged and disgusted at what's happening right now.
Now, I think this is an important distinction to make. I don't think you're an anti-vaxxer, are you? I'll let you clarify, though. But I don't think you don't come across me as an anti-vaxxer or anti-science. But my assessment, you're anti-coercion.
I'm not anti anything.
Yeah.
I'm pro discussion. I love science. I'm not a scientist, but I think science has been completely redefined. If Dina Hinshaw is the science, then I have a problem with that. There has been no debate, no scientific debate, and as far as I can see, and there has been a one-sided narrative throughout this entire ordeal. So I am not anti-vaccine. I don't even like the term anti-vaccine. Mm-hmm. I've had more vaccinations than probably anybody in my department. Okay, I've been in Afghanistan. I've been in Bosnia. I've trained with the United States Army. I've received more vaccines than I can even count. So no, I am not anti-vaccine.
Now, what's the deadline for you to show proof of vaccination in your department?
November 30th is the date that we have to show our papers, so to speak. And then if we don't provide that, we have until December 14th, where they will, I believe, put us on leave without pay.
Which is constructive dismissal.
Yeah, that's how I see it, yes.
Now, you sort of came on the radar because I have a friend working inside the machinery of government, but she's a freedom fighter. And she put me onto the case of David Price. But you're not alone. There's a bunch of other employees within the Alberta government who have sort of come together from other departments. Tell me what's going on there.
Well, so I actually found this organization called Government Employees Against Vaccine Mandates. Well, they found me. Because I've decided with my family to let this job go, if that's the way things have to play out. I wanted to leave a message. I don't know how strong the message is going to be, but I hope it makes a ripple, if not a wave. So I sent an email to my immediate manager stating my intent that I'm absolutely not going to comply with the vaccine mandate. I am not going to provide any medical information. I'm not going to comply with testing, and I do not. I am not going to get an exemption either. In no free society should anyone have to provide an exemption in order to freely come to work. So I don't believe in any of that, and I stated that very clearly in a letter to my manager that I CC to the entire department, to the deputy minister, the minister's office of my department, and to the premier's office.
Did you get any response back?
Nothing.
I guess my final question to you is, what is your message to the government? Because we do know that the ministers frequently watch the work that we do. So if you could speak directly to the Minister of Ag and Forestry, Jason Kenney, what would you say to him about not just your situation, but the situation of your fellow coworkers?
I would say that there are some incredibly caring, incredibly hardworking people in the government that work hard every single day, despite what a lot of people think. We're not just a charity organization. We don't just take your tax dollars and do nothing with it. We work very, very hard. We're very, very dedicated, and there are many, many of them. And not everybody has to think the same way. And above all, I cannot believe the direction that we're going. Mm-hmm. Medical choice is paramount. There should be no dictate when it comes to my body or anyone else's. I do not care if you are vaccinated, and it's none of your business whether I am vaccinated. And no carrot should be held to anyone just to have a job in a free democratic country.
David has served our country with distinction, and like any employee, he has a right to keep private things private and to make medical decisions without the coercion of his employer or society or the government. And as you heard, they already have a lawyer. He and his fellow Government of Alberta colleagues have hired Leighton Gray. They just need some money. That's where fightvaccinepassports.com comes in, but it's also where you come in too. So first, let's hear from their lawyer, Leighton Gray. Take a listen.
You recall back on September the 30th, Premier Kenney came out and he made an announcement that the government of Alberta was implementing a new COVID-19 vaccination policy. The province, of course, didn't go ahead, and this is significant, didn't go ahead and actually pass a law requiring mandatory vaccination because they realized that would be a severe constitutional violation. And so they weaponized this policy to be instituted through the public service to put pressure on the public service to oppress workers with this mandatory vaccination policy. And so a certain schedule, timeline was imposed on a group of large groups of workers who were working on behalf of the Alberta public sector. Starting on October 15th, there was a requirement they would have to declare vaccination status. And of course, we take the position that in and of itself is a violation of their privacy rights because whether or not someone is vaccinated is only between they and their doctors, and it is part of in my respectful view, it's a charter violation to compel people to produce that information. I think it's a violation of both Section 7 of the Charter, which protects life, liberty, and security of the person. Arguably, also it's a Section 8 unreasonable search and seizure because you're compelling the production of information which is going to be used against them in a way that is discriminatory. And of course, if you declare your vaccination status as being unvaccinated, then you get categorized as basically a heretic in the eyes of the Alberta government. Now we're into a situation where proof of full COVID-19 vaccination has to be submitted by these Government of Alberta workers by the end of November. And the group that I'm representing is still steadfast and stubbornly saying, no, I'm not going to be vaccinated. But here we get into a situation where if they're not vaccinated, if they don't provide proof of vaccination, then by the 14th of December, then they're getting into a situation where they can be sent home on something called an involuntary absence without leave, which is kind of fun with language, but when you're sitting in your kitchen, I think it would be hard to distinguish between being fired and being sent home on an involuntary absence without leave. Yeah, so it's sort of like the difference between divorce and your wife has moved out and she won't talk to you anymore.
Yeah, it's the difference. It's
the
difference between Jason Kenney's restrictions exemption program and a vaccine passport, as in there's no distinction whatsoever.
Yes. Or going back further, the difference between measures taken by the Alberta government and lockdowns, because of course our government has never admitted that they've ever imposed anything called a lockdown. So that's where people are, and there is, however, it's in fairness, it is worth mentioning that the government of Alberta is offering an accommodation, if you will, if you regard it as such. I certainly don't. That employees will be able to produce a negative PCR or rapid test result that has to be stamped within 72 hours. This is in lieu of taking the vaccine. But of course, the cost of that is passed on to the employee. And anyone who has had to go down this road knows that these are about $60 a pop, and you can only get them at Shoppers Drug Mart. I don't understand why that's the case, but that is an exclusive contract. And you have to, so basically $60 a week just to keep working. It's like a tax. At least it works that way to the employee. And of course, anyone who's had one of these tests knows that although they're quick, they aren't painless. It's really unpleasant to have a swab shoved into your nasal cavity. And from speaking to the workers who have been through or have been subjected to this constant testing, there is an attrition aspect to it. It's difficult to sort of maintain that. And, if I'm being cynical about it, I think in a way, it's just a surreptitious means of trying to further pressure employees to comply to the vaccine, or, getting them to quit.
Yeah. So sorry to interrupt you. It sounds to interrupt you, but it sounds like the process is also the punishment. For, a couple of the workers that I spoke to, they live out in the middle of nowhere. So going to get this Shoppers Drug Mart test in advance of being able to go to work, that's, 2 hours and some out of their day just to go and get the test and come back home. And then the two of them both work in government. So that is, by my math, about $6,200 a year out of the family's budget to submit to testing so that they can go to work in the same manner that they have for the last 20 months of the pandemic.
Mm-hmm. And that's true. And of course, that's fundamentally discriminatory. You're setting up a false dichotomy between vaccinated and unvaccinated workers, which we say is discriminatory. So what we're trying to do is to help them develop some solidarity and push back. And hopefully we can cause enough pressure to bear upon the unions so that they'll see that it's actually a lesser of two evils to side with the union than as opposed to upsetting management or upsetting the government. So that's the goal. We want to activate the unions. We don't want to fight with them. And that's also true in this case. So that's something that we're doing. In support of that, we filed a cease and desist letter. Of course, your viewers know all about those. That's gone out. So the employer is aware of the situation, and so is the union. The other thing we've recommended to these workers is to file human rights complaints, because we're convinced that these are fundamentally human rights issues. What these workers are being asked to do is unconscionable. It is a situation where workers are being told, look, by their employer suddenly after they've been picked, they've been selected for their individual characteristics. The employers are saying, we don't care who you are, we don't care what you've done, we don't care how hard you've worked, how loyal you are, how talented you are, stick out your arm. And it's a dehumanizing situation. And these workers understand this. They understand it keenly, they get it. And what they're being asked to do fundamentally is to trade their liberty, the sanctity, the integrity of their bodies in exchange for the security of a job. And 250 years ago, Benjamin Franklin wrote very famously, very accurately and poignantly, he said, if you are willing to trade a little bit of liberty for some security, you'll end up with neither, and you'll deserve neither. And so that's where workers are. And it's our view, and I know Rebel supports this, and that's why the Democracy Fund exists. We see there's a distinction between the vaccines per se and vaccine mandates.
Yeah.
Vaccines are a medical issue, and people are entitled to make their own choices about that. In fact, I've had the opportunity to speak to many eminent scientists because of my work on these cases over the past year and a half, and many of them think that the vaccines are a relatively safe medicine. But that's besides the point. The vaccine mandates are a liberty issue. And what these government employers are trying to do is they're trying to conflate the issue, to obfuscate, in my opinion, to turn this into an issue of occupational health and safety. And it's not an occupational health and safety issue, it's a liberty issue. And even if it were an occupational health and safety issue, that is not sufficient. It's not justified in a free and democratic society to suppress liberty in the name of occupational health and safety. That is a paltry trade that rips off and offends the rights of workers in this country, and it has to be resisted. And it has to be resisted at all events. And we're very grateful for the opportunity to represent such brave workers who come from all walks of life, but they're the ones who are being oppressed by this, not the political class, not the uber rich, not street people, not people in prisons, but the hardworking glue Canadians. And I'm convinced that this is an attack on the economic freedom of the working class in order to extort and to take away their political freedom. And this is why it's dangerous. It's unprecedented in Canada. It must be fought at all events. But essentially, that's a summary of what we're doing in this particular case, and really on behalf of all the groups that we have the privilege to represent through the Democracy Fund.
My big concern with vaccine mandates, besides, the medical privacy and the coercion of it all, is that I'm worried about what it means for the future of society when we remove the most moral and conscious-minded people from positions of power. This public health purge weakens the institutions of civil society. And in the future, it will serve to make these institutions more vulnerable to even worse madness than what we're seeing now. That's why we have to fight vaccine passports as hard as we can and as smart as we can. That's also why the lawsuits being taken by fightvaccinepassports.com are strategic. They've been examined by lawyers from the Democracy Fund to measure how effective a win would be in freeing even more people. So while these Alberta government workers are sticking their necks out and putting their jobs on the line to come forward and fight their own bosses, they're truly doing it for all of us too. And so we should support them. If you would like to donate to their strategic lawsuit, you can do so at fightvaccinepassports.com. And through that partnership with the Democracy Fund, all of your donations there now qualify for a charitable tax receipt. Friends, what else can we do but fight? And thank you to everybody who's already donated. For Rebel News, I'm Sheila Gunn-Reid. Fight Vaccine Passports is taking 20 strategic legal cases in jurisdictions all across the country in an effort to overturn workplace vaccine mandates and the vaccine passport system. If you'd like to donate, please visit fightvaccinepassports.com. And all donations there now qualify for a charitable tax receipt through the registered Canadian charity, the Democracy Fund.